Welcome to a night that changed everything. On the 13th of February 2026, at exactly 4:17 UTC, something extraordinary unfolded in the sky. For those of us watching, this wasn't just another celestial event. It was a spectacle that left us questioning everything we thought we knew about the universe. What we witnessed that night was no ordinary occurrence. It was the story of 3I Atlas, an object that has been under close observation for months. Initially, we thought it was a comet, a harmless chunk of ice and rock drifting through space. But that assumption was shattered last night when the object exhibited behavior that no comet could ever display. Let's rewind a bit. Imagine standing in complete darkness, your eyes scanning the heavens. You notice a faint star in the distance. Suddenly, this star flares up with an electric blue light brighter than Venus, brighter than the International Space Station, lasts for exactly 0.4 seconds, and then silence. It's not just a flash, a precise, rhythmic pulse of blue light, and then, exactly 23 seconds later, it happens again. The light pulses with perfect synchronization, at a wavelength of 440 nanometers. This isn't the random, chaotic behavior we expect from nature. This is something much more calculated, more deliberate. This isn't just a sight you'd see through a telescope. This event was so intense, so precise, that it was visible simultaneously from observatories in 12 countries, from the deserts of Chile to the coastlines of New Zealand. Thousands of amateur astronomers saw it with their own eyes, confirming the strange phenomena. This wasn't a comet doing what comets do. A comet does not strobe. A comet doesn't release coherent bursts of energy that can be tracked across the globe. Nature is messy. It's random. But what we saw was anything but that. We're talking about an object that is 240 million kilometers away. And yet, for this pulse of light to be visible to the naked eye from that distance, the energy output required is mind-boggling. We're talking 400 terawatts of raw power released in the blink of an eye, more power than the entire electrical grid of the United States generates in one entire day. And 3I Atlas didn't just do it once. It didn't happen twice. No, it kept doing it for 12 minutes. Imagine that level of energy being harnessed and released again and again. When I first saw the data from the James Webb Space Telescope, it didn't take long to realize that something wasn't right. The readings were unlike anything we had encountered before. This wasn't the reflection of sunlight off a frozen surface. This wasn't fluorescence caused by solar radiation. No, what we were seeing was an internal emission, something that pointed to a much more sophisticated and unnatural source. The blue light that erupted from 3I Atlas at 440 nanometers isn't something we associate with natural cometary gases. It's the kind of light we see in high-energy environments like fusion reactors or plasma drives. It's a light that you can't just stumble upon in space. This is precisely the kind of emission that we associate with advanced technology, with something engineered, not just a random object passing through space. The question, then, is not what happened, because we already know that. The question is, who or what initiated this event? Rocks, comets, asteroids, they don't blink. They don't pulse in perfect intervals. They don't emit directed energy like this. So what is 3I Atlas? The more we dig into the data, the clearer it becomes that we might be dealing with something far more advanced than anything we've encountered in our studies of the cosmos. Let's backtrack for a moment. 3I Atlas was first detected by the Atlas Survey System in Hawaii late last year. At first, it seemed like just another hyperbolic interstellar object, similar to Oumuamua, a passing space visitor. The trajectory was straightforward, the speed was high but calculable. We didn't think much of it. We labeled it a comet and filed it away. But then the data started to shift. Something wasn't right. On the 19th of December 2025, the object did something no comet is supposed to do. It stopped rotating. Now, in the vacuum of space, when an object is rotating, it keeps rotating unless something external forces it to stop. In a span of just 4 hours, 3I Atlas went from a regular 7-hour rotation period to 0 rotation, becoming completely still. It was anomaly number 1, and that was just the beginning. A few weeks later, a second anomaly surfaced. 3I Atlas began to accelerate, not by much, just 0.04 kilometers per second, but it happened without any visible cause. There was no outgassing, no tail, no rocket effect that we normally expect from such an event. It simply moved faster. The object changed its speed without shedding mass, without any of the typical processes that would explain this kind of movement. This is where things started to get truly strange. Comets simply don't do this. Natural objects don't defy the laws of physics like this, not without something deliberate at play. Then came the blue pulse. On February 13th, at 4:17 UTC, the object flashed again. This was no ordinary flash, it was something completely unprecedented. This time, it wasn't just a faint, passing light. The pulse was so intense that it was picked up by sensors that weren't even looking for it. NASA's Deep Space Network, the massive antenna array in Canberra, Australia, detected a surge in radio frequency emission exactly when the light pulse occurred. This wasn't just a visual event. It was a multi-sensor, multi-location event. The European Southern Observatory, located in Paranal, Chile, also captured the visual spectrum of the flash. The intensity of the blue light was so powerful that the spectrographs were overloaded, unable to handle the saturation of data. And then, the South African Astronomical Observatory cross-checked the event, confirming the exact same readings, independently. These weren't isolated data points. This was a global phenomenon. 3 independent observatories on 3 continents all saw the same thing. And the conclusion was unmistakable. The energy emitted from 3I Atlas was the equivalent of a tactical nuclear detonation, but the energy wasn't spread out in every direction like an explosion. No. The light was collimated, it was focused into a beam, a directed pulse aimed directly at Earth. What does that tell us? If a comet were to explode, the energy would be scattered everywhere. It would be a chaotic, omnidirectional burst, radiating in all directions. But the data from the European Southern Observatory showed us something that doesn't happen in nature. The blue light from 3I Atlas wasn't scattered. It was focused, concentrated, and it was all aimed right at us. In that moment, at 4:17 UTC, that beam of blue light was pointed directly at Earth, like someone shining a flashlight in our direction across the vastness of space. This isn't the kind of behavior we expect from any natural object, especially not from a comet. And then the mystery deepened further. When we analyzed the spectral data from the event, it became clear that this pulse of light was unlike anything we've seen before in the history of astronomy. Typically, when light from an astronomical object passes through space, it picks up background noise. We see carbon lines, dust scattering, water vapor, and other elements distorting the light. But with 3I Atlas, there was none of that. The spectrum was pure. It was like hearing a single, perfect note from a violin in the middle of a roaring hurricane, clear, distinct, and without the usual background noise that nature typically introduces. This is not how nature behaves. Nature is messy. This signal, though, was pristine. It was like a message coming from somewhere far beyond our understanding. As I continued to process the data, I couldn't shake the realization that we were witnessing something completely out of the ordinary. The implications were impossible to ignore. This wasn't a comet, not in any traditional sense. What we were seeing here was an object that had somehow stabilized its rotation, adjusted its speed without any observable propellant, and then sent a directed energy pulse at our planet. That's not something a natural object does. That's something that requires intention. It requires design. It requires intelligence. At this point, skepticism about the object's origins began to rise. Some scientists tried to explain the behavior of 3I Atlas through conventional means. They suggested that what we were witnessing could be a cryovolcanic eruption, a kind of release of exotic ice trapped within the object. But this explanation didn't fit the facts. If it were an eruption, we would have expected to see mass loss, a tail, maybe even a trail of debris. Instead, 3I Atlas moved in ways that were inconsistent with that explanation. It wasn't outgassing. It wasn't breaking apart. It was a precise, deliberate, machine-like pulse of energy, and it was repeating itself again and again with unwavering precision. You see, after the first flash at 4:17 UTC, the object didn't just go dark and stay silent. No, it repeated the pulse. It repeated it 33 times in perfect intervals. Each flash lasted exactly 0.4 seconds, and after each pulse, the object stayed dark for exactly 23 seconds. It was like clockwork. This wasn't a random eruption. This was something with a rhythm, with a pattern, with timing, and the timing was so exact, so precise, that it couldn't be explained by any natural event we know of. A volcano doesn't follow a stopwatch. A gas pocket doesn't explode with metronomic rhythm. Only something engineered, something designed, could perform with this kind of precision. The exact timing of the flashes was staggering. The intervals between each pulse were measured to within 0.03 seconds. That kind of precision is not something you get from a chunk of frozen ice in space. That's the kind of timing you get from a quartz crystal oscillator or an atomic clock. That's the kind of precision we see in man-made technology, not in the chaotic randomness of space. As I studied the data, a theory began to form, a theory that kept astrophysicists awake at night. What if 3I Atlas wasn't a comet at all? What if it wasn't even a natural object? What if it was something else, something far more advanced, far more calculated? The precision, the rhythm, the directed energy, it all pointed to one conclusion. This was no ordinary object. This was something that had been built, engineered. This was something with a purpose. Now, the data was beginning to make sense, but something even more unsettling was unfolding. On January 14th, something changed. The pulse pattern, which had been so consistent, suddenly shifted. The 13th flash lasted longer, 1.2 seconds. The 14th was slightly shorter, 0.8 seconds. The rhythm had broken. The pattern was no longer predictable, and with it, the energy output spiked, increasing by a factor of 10. For a brief moment, 3I Atlas outshone every star in its vicinity. This wasn't just a slight variation. This was a significant deviation, and it was clear that this wasn't in the model. It wasn't predicted. This was no longer just an anomaly. It was a message. As we continued to study the variations in the pulse, another realization dawned. The energy being emitted from 3I Atlas wasn't just high. It was unlike anything we've ever seen before in the history of astronomy. The object was producing light in a specific wavelength, 440 nanometers. This is blue light, a high-energy light that requires immense power to produce. In the universe, blue light is costly. It's not the kind of light that nature produces easily. Red light, for example, is cheap. It's the fading embers of a dying star or the cooling lava from a planet. But blue light requires heat. It requires intense, violent processes to generate. For a comet to emit blue light, there must be intense ultraviolet radiation from the sun. That's usually how we see faint, greenish-blue comas around cometary nuclei. But this was different. This was a piercing, electric blue light, pure, undistorted, and incredibly bright. It wasn't the faint glow we're used to seeing around comets. It was something much more focused, much more intense. To generate a pulse of light that bright from an object no larger than 2.4 kilometers in diameter, the energy required would be equivalent to a small star burning on the surface of the object. We're talking about temperatures exceeding 30,000 degrees Kelvin. That's not just hot. That's beyond the normal expectations of any comet or asteroid in our solar system. If this were a natural phenomenon, if this were a simple outgassing of ice or gas, the entire surface of the object would have had to vaporize instantly to release that much energy. But it didn't. 3I Atlas remained intact. It didn't disintegrate. It didn't break apart. It stayed solid. This suggests one of two possibilities. Either we're witnessing a state of matter we've never seen before, some form of exotic, hypervolatile ice that releases energy through a chemical reaction we can't yet understand, or, here's the more terrifying possibility, the energy source isn't natural at all. It's artificial. Looking at the data from the European Southern Observatory, there's something missing. There are no absorption lines for water. There are no absorption lines for dust. There's nothing that suggests this is a natural object. What we're seeing is a pure emission line of ionized gas, something that's only seen in man-made objects like neon signs or plasma thrusters. This points to one thing. Whatever 3I Atlas is, it's not a comet. It's not a natural object. It's something engineered, something designed, something intelligent. On January 14th, the pulse pattern continued to evolve, and it wasn't just a shift in timing. The energy output surged. The brightness of the object increased by a factor of 10. For a moment, 3I Atlas outshone every other star in its immediate vicinity. And then the pattern began to shift again. The 13th flash lasted longer at 1.2 seconds. The 14th was shorter at 0.8 seconds. The consistency was broken. The pulse length was no longer following the expected rhythm. The object was changing its behavior in ways that no comet or asteroid could. These fluctuations were not random. They were deliberate. They were calculated. The data showed us that this wasn't a comet in the traditional sense. The variables at play were too complex, too precise to be natural. There was something far more sophisticated at work. This wasn't just a flash of light. It was a highly organized and advanced form of communication or propulsion. And that's when the implications became clear. 3I Atlas wasn't just a passing object. It wasn't just a comet or asteroid coming from deep space. It was something that was designed, something that had been sent here for a reason. But the question remained, who or what sent it? We also saw that the pulses were not just flashes of light. They were conveying information. We analyzed the gaps between the pulses, and when we did, something remarkable happened. The pattern formed a sequence of prime numbers: 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, 13. These are prime numbers, the universal signature of intelligence. No natural object in the universe produces prime numbers. Pulsars don't pulse in primes. Quasars flicker randomly. But prime numbers? That's a signal of intelligence. A signal that requires an understanding of mathematics. 3I Atlas just broadcasted the first 6 prime numbers in sequence. using high-energy blue light directly at Earth. If this is a natural phenomenon, then we are witnessing the statistical miracle of the century. The odds of such a sequence appearing randomly in nature are astronomically low. And if it's not a glitch in our instruments, if 3I Atlas really is transmitting this sequence, then what we're seeing is a message from somewhere out there. The discovery of prime numbers in the pulse pattern is what triggered the post-detection protocol at the International Astronomical Union. This is an unprecedented event. The protocol is activated when a signal of potential artificial origin is detected. The United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs has been alerted. This is a big deal, something we've never seen in the history of radio astronomy. In 60 years of studying the stars, this protocol has never been fully triggered until now. That alone tells you how serious this is. We're not dealing with just another space anomaly. This is a message. The object went silent after the prime number sequence. It stopped pulsing, it stopped rotating. It's like someone flipped a switch and everything went quiet. And that silence is what's most unsettling. If this were a natural event, we would expect the object to gradually fade out. We would expect the silence to come slowly, but instead, the silence was instantaneous. That doesn't happen in nature. And if that silence is deliberate, if it's intentional, then the implications are terrifying. We're witnessing something extraordinary. We have an object, 3I Atlas, that has stopped its own rotation. It has emitted a blue light pulse at 440 nanometers, brighter than Venus. It has broadcasted prime numbers directly at Earth, and it has triggered the post-detection protocol at the International Astronomical Union. But the question remains, why the silence? And what does it mean for us? The world is watching. The Green Bank Telescope in West Virginia is currently pointing directly at the coordinates where the pulses originated. The data is coming in, but we still don't have the answers. In 48 hours, 3I Atlas will reach its closest point to the Sun. The telescopes are active, and the world is waiting to find out what this object really is. The clock is ticking, and whatever 3I Atlas truly is, we are about to find out. Stay tuned. If you found this as mind-blowing as I did, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell to get notified as we continue to explore the incredible mysteries of the universe. What do you think? Are we truly alone? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.